The Hidden Treasure by St. Leonard of Port Maurice, Chapter 1, Sections 14 through 16. But the infinite benefit of the Holy Mass does not end here, for it enables us, moreover, to pay the fourth debt which we owe to God. I have already told you that debt is one which obliges you to supplicate Him incessantly and to ask new graces of Him. You are well aware that your necessities of soul and body are grievous and numerous, and you know, besides, that you must needs have recourse to Him at every moment of your existence for His compassionating help, since He, and He alone, is the chief source of all our good, temporal as well as eternal. But on the other hand, with what dispositions of heart or soul can you supplicate Him to give you additional aids of grace, seeing as you do the limitless ingratitude you have exhibited to Him, notwithstanding the countless graces bestowed upon you? Nay, have you not turned the very graces He gave you into so many insults and outrages against Him? Nevertheless, let not your heart wax faint, but rather be of good hope, because if you have not deserved those graces, our good Jesus has deserved them for you. In fact, for this end, He has deigned to become in the Mass a pacifying victim, that is, a supplicating sacrifice, in order to obtain through it, the Mass, from the Eternal Father, all things we may require. Yes, in the Holy Mass, our dear and beloved Jesus, who is our great High Priest, recommends our humble petition to His Father, nay, prays for us and becomes our advocate. If we only remembered that the Virgin Mother unites her supplications with ours to the Eternal Father to obtain the graces which we need, how confident should we be that our prayers will be heard? What confidence, what hope, therefore, should we not cherish when we bear in mind that in the Mass Jesus Himself prays for us, nay, offers His most precious blood to the Eternal Father for us, and becomes our advocate? O thrice blessed Mass, Thou art the exhaustless mine of all our good. But we must go deep into this inestimable mine in order to discover the great treasures that it contains. Oh, what priceless jewels of grace and virtue! Oh, what super excellent gifts does not the Holy Mass obtain for us! In the first place, it obtains for us all the spiritual graces and all the goods needful for the soul, as, for example, true sorrow and repentance for sins, victory over temptations, no matter whence they come, whether from evil associations and bad companions, or from the internal promptings of our own rebellious nature. Yes, the Holy Mass obtains for us all those aids of grace which we need in order to be able to arise from the slough of sin, to stand erect and walk onward in the ways of God. It likewise obtains for us innumerable holy inspirations and internal impulses which dispose us to shake off tepidity and stimulate us to work out our salvation with a fervor more ardent, with will more prompt, and intention purer and more meritorious. All these aids are accompanied by an inestimable treasure, and indeed they are the most efficacious means of obtaining from God the grace of final perseverance, on which our eternal salvation depends, and also a moral certainty of eternal beatitude in the life to come, so far as that certainty is vouchsafed to man during his mortal pilgrimage. Furthermore, it obtains for us temporal goods in as far as they are conducive to the salvation of the soul, health of body, abundance, peace, with the exclusion of all the evils that are opposed to it, be they pestilence, earthquakes, wars, famine, persecutions, litigations, domestic hostilities, calumnies, and insults. In a word, it liberates us from all evils and enriches us with all that is good. And to sum all in one short sentence, the Holy Mass is the golden key of paradise. And since the Eternal Father has given us this key, what is there of all His unbounded treasures that He can refuse us? He that spared not even His own Son, but delivered Him up for us all, how hath He not also with Him given us all things? Hence you may clearly understand with what good reason a certain holy priest was wont to say when speaking of the Holy Mass, "No matter how great the graces I ask of God for myself or others, as often as I celebrate Mass, they all are a mere nothing compared to the offering that I make to Him." He indeed reasoned rightly when he said, "All the favors that I ask of God when celebrating the Holy Mass are created and finite things, whereas the gifts that I offer to him are uncreated and infinite. And so, to balance the account equitably, I am the creditor and he is the debtor. Of course, he knew that the gift and the power of offering the gift came primarily from God, and full of this conviction, he asked great graces of God and obtained still greater. And you, how is it that you are not alive to all this? Why do you not ask great gains and graces? I would advise and exhort you to beseech God as often as you assist at Mass to make you a great saint. Do you think that I advise you to ask too much? Well, I tell you that it is not too much. Has not our loving Lord and Master told us in his gospel that he is ready to bestow the kingdom of heaven on a man in return for a cup of cold water given for love of him to a disciple? How, therefore, could he refuse us 100 heavens, did so many exist, in return for the blood of his blessed Son offered to him in the Mass? Why, therefore, would you hesitate to believe that he would bestow upon you every virtue and all the perfections that are required to make you a saint, yea, a great saint in heaven? O blessed Mass, let your heart's wishes therefore be multiplied 1,000-fold, and ask as much as you will, always bearing in mind that you are asking of a God who does not impoverish himself by giving, and consequently, the more you ask, the more will he give you. But have you reflected on this? Besides the blessings we ask of our good God in the Holy Mass, he is wont to grant us many others for which we have not asked him. St. Jerome affirms this as certain. Assuredly, says the saint, the Lord grants all the favors for which we petition him in the Mass, provided they be suitable to us, and what is far more admirable, he very often grants us that for which we do not petition him, always provided that we place no obstacles to his holy designs. Hence the Mass may be justly described as the sun of the human race, shedding its splendors on the good and bad. Nor does there exist on this earth a single soul so perverse, who, hearing Holy Mass, does not derive some great benefit from it, often without even thinking of it. We have a singular instance of this in a narrative which St. Antoninus has left us on record. 'Tis the following. 2 young men of dissolute habits went one day into a forest to amuse themselves, after one of them has assisted at the holy sacrifice of the Mass. Suddenly the sky was overcast with thick clouds, and amid the loud pealing of the thunder and the flashes of the lightning, they distinctly heard a mysterious voice crying aloud, "Kill! Kill!" when lo, the youth who had not heard Mass was struck down by the lightning and burnt to ashes. Terrified at this awful spectacle, his companion took to flight, hoping to save his life, when to his horror he heard the same voice repeated the word, "Kill! Kill!" Giving himself up for lost, he was every instant expecting the fatal blow, when he heard another voice replying, I cannot, for today he heard the Word was made flesh, and the Mass he heard will not suffer me to strike him dead." Oh, how often has God shielded you from death, or, at all events, from many and many a terrible danger for the sake of the Holy Mass at which you assisted. St. Gregory the Great assures you of this in his book of Dialogues. Hear what it says. It is most indubitably certain that whoever hears Mass shall be secured from many and many a danger, both foreseen and unforeseen. And St. Augustine adds, whoever hears Mass devoutly shall be preserved from a sudden death, which is the most awful weapon with which divine justice punishes the sinner. Lo, says the saint, here is the wonderful preservative against a sudden death. Hear Mass every day, but hear it with all possible devotion. Whosoever bears about him such an invaluable preservative as this may live morally certain that he shall not be overtaken by such a terrible calamity. There is an option attributed by some to St. Augustine, namely that a person does not grow older during the time he assists at the celebration of the Holy Mass, but on the contrary, remains all the time in the same essential vigor in which he was at the beginning of the divine offering. I am not disposed to examine whether this be true or not, but I affirm that although a person assisting at Holy Mass grows older as far as age is concerned, he nevertheless does not grow older in sin, because, as St. Gregory tells us, a well-disposed man who hears Holy Mass with the due attention is preserved in the way of rectitude, while grace and merit increase in him, and he is making new acquisitions of virtue which render him more and more acceptable to God. Nay, more, St. Bernard informs us that more is gained by one single Mass, and let us understand him as speaking of its intrinsic value, than by distributing all your substance among the poor or going on pilgrimage to all the most vulnerable sanctuaries on this globe. O infinite wealth of the Holy Mass, let this truth strike deep root in your heart. By assisting at or celebrating a single Mass, considered in itself and its intrinsic worth, one may become more meritorious in the sight of God than he who, opening the treasure of his hoarded wealth, distributes all that he possesses for the relief of the poor, or goes on a pilgrimage throughout the universe, visiting with consummate devotion the sanctuaries of Jerusalem, Rome, Compostela, Loreto, and every other besides. This grand truth is easily deduced from what St. Thomas, the angelic doctor, lays down in the following words. The Holy Mass contains all those fruits, all those graces, and nay, all those infinite treasures which the Son of God scattered so abundantly over his church in the bloody sacrifice of the cross. Now pause a while, close the book, read no further for the present, but rather count one by one all those particular utilities or advantages of Holy Mass. Ponder them well in silence, and then answer me. Will you ever again have any difficulty in believing that a single Mass, viewed in its intrinsic worth and value, is of such efficacy that according to the doctors of the Church it might have sufficed to obtain the salvation of the whole human race? Suppose that our Lord Jesus Christ had not suffered at all on Calvary, and that instead of the bloody sacrifice of the cross, he had solely instituted the Mass with express command that this one single Mass should only be celebrated in all the world once. Well then, had God been pleased to act thus, you must know that one single Mass celebrated by the humblest priest on earth would have been most amply sufficient, considered in its intrinsic value, and so far as its own share in the work is concerned, to obtain from God the salvation of all mankind. Yes, one Mass, admitting the case we have supposed, would have been sufficient to obtain the conversion of all the Turks, of all the schismatics, in fine of all the infidels, and even all the bad Christians, closing the gates of hell against all sinners, and delivering from purgatory all the souls that are being purged there. But alas, we miserable and thoughtless beings, by our tepidity, feeble devotion, and the scandalous immodesties which we commit over and over again while assisting at Mass, how much do we narrow its vast circumference and render its inestimable value inefficacious. Would that I could ascend to the summit of the loftiest mountains and cry aloud so that the whole world might hear me exclaiming, Foolish, foolish people, what are ye doing? Why will you not hasten to the churches to assist at every Mass celebrated therein? Why won't you imitate those holy angels who, according to St. John Chrysostom, descend in thousands from the heavens when Mass is being celebrated, and array themselves before our altars, covered with wings of holy awe, tarrying there during the august sacrifice, in order to intercede more efficaciously for us, knowing well that this is the most opportune time and the most propitious occasion that can be for obtaining favors from heaven? Ah, are you not filled with shame and confusion when you call to mind how little value you have hitherto set upon the Holy Mass? Will you not blush for having often and often profaned this thrice sanctified oblation? But what shall I say of you, if you unhappily you are one of those whose rash and impious tongues dare to say, a Mass more or a Mass less counts for nothing? Thank you for listening to another episode of Tradition with a Catholic T.